Hey everyone, Parallel here. Welcome to Star Trek Online. Season 13 is out now, and as I'm sure many of you are aware, there are a vast number of balance changes that have been made to the space combat. And I think everyone might be a little bit overwhelmed. Well, at least I know that I am a bit overwhelmed at the extent of the balance changes. It just affects so many different systems, lots of changes to captain abilities, bridge officer abilities, skills, items, nerfs, buffs. It's all there, and it is very much overwhelming. So what I'd like to do in this video is try to break it down a little bit and go through some of these balance changes and really focus in on the details. Now, if you're interested in more of just the highlights of the Season 13 content in the patch notes, I recommend you check out my previous video. This video is just going to focus in solely on the just the balance changes. Now, I would like to take a little bit of a different approach here. Instead of just reading through a long list, and I mean long, there is a very long list of all the balance changes in the patch notes. Rather than just reading through that, what I'd like to do is just actually go through and actually create a build in this video. So I'll go through and create the actual build by starting with the old sort of meta build prior to Season 13. So I'll start out at that point with the old meta build, and then actually go through and update it to a, based on all the Season 13 changes. I hesitate to say I will update it to the new meta because Season 13 is still very new, and I don't think the new meta has really settled down yet at this point. So basically this video will just take an old build and kind of go through updating it to a new build based on all the changes, and hopefully that will help everyone out. Maybe that'll make it a little bit more clear and kind of talk through all the changes as I'm making them, and how that's relevant to what is in the patch notes and what actually all these balance changes entails. So that's how I'm going to go through it. Now, I know I just said I'm not going to read through a list of patch notes, but I do want to mention a couple things first because I forgot to talk about them in my previous video. And since I'm going to be approaching this from the standpoint of my Romulan tactical captain here, I did want to mention first off that there were some changes to captain powers. So in this video, I'm only going to really go into depth into the tactical side of it, so those will be addressed more here. But I did just want to mention that also there were changes to science and engineering captain powers that were actually really good. So I thought I'd quickly go through those before, and then I'll focus in just on updating my build here on my tactical character. Believe it or not, tactical captains got a little bit of a nerf. So attack pattern alpha now only lasts for 20 seconds instead of 30. So you have to use it a little bit more judiciously now. You can't just spam it. And let me just mention, across the board, all captain abilities now have a internal cooldown, so that cannot be reduced. So sort of like, I don't want to call it global cooldown, but kind of like the shared cooldown on bridge officer abilities that you can't be reduced below. Now captain abilities have that as well. So you can't reduce captain abilities down beyond a certain threshold, i.e., even if you stack all of the cooldown reduction in the world, you cannot make any of these captain abilities have 100% uptime. It cannot be done. So you do have to use them more judiciously, and it is kind of just an across-the-board nerf. They will have just across-the-board much less uptime on all the captain abilities, including attack pattern alpha, which now has a shorter duration as well. Go down fighting had a lot of changes. Kind of has gone back and forth, but basically now the go down fighting ability will sort of dynamically update with your current health. So you still have to go below 50% health to activate it, and then as your health moves around, it will update the damage bonus that you're getting. So if you're at 0% health, you will get 100% damage bonus, and if you're when actively treated as a 50% hull or less, down to 0%, where it is at 100% damage buff. Okay. For every 1% below 50% GDF, bonus scales up by 1%. So yeah, so it goes from 50% down up to 100% when you're at 0% health. If you ever go above 50%, I think it just caps out and just says you're still just get the 50% buff. But now it has a very short duration, only 15 seconds, but they also did very much shorten the cooldown as well of 45 seconds. So you can actually use GDF kind of more frequently now. And it will now just update more dynamically. So you can't just, for example, get down to like 1% health, activate it, and have a huge damage buff for the full duration. And because if you go down to 1%, activate it, and then you activate a hull heal, then then go down fighting will scale with that. So those are the kind of the big changes there for tactical. Now engineer captains, you got some really nice buffs. In fact, I do want to check this out. I haven't rebuilt my or respect my engineering character yet, but these look really nice. So EPS power transfer, that has had basically, I guess the best way to describe it now is it's basically a override subsystem safeties on steroids. So it's OSS on steroids without the downsides. So basically it gives you a huge buff to your maximum power and your current power, which is fantastic. And now also Nadion inversion has been buffed to give you a much larger resistance to your weapon power drain. So those two combined, you will have very large buff to your weapon damage during that time while it's while that EPS power transfer Nadion version is going. You will have really, really high power output for your weapons and not much drain at all. So that's fantastic. That is a pretty significant buff to engineers. Engineers are kind of the masters of power systems now, which is kind of cool. I think that's a good theme for engineers. Rotate shield frequency got a nice buff. It's seen an increase to 33% to its healing and has added bonus of shield drain resistance, which is kind of cool. Engineering fleet also got a buff. Big buff to its damage resistance and hull restoration, regeneration, and warp core efficiency. Okay. Miracle Worker got also a huge buff, a much larger heal that scales up much better now, and also provides you with a big chunk of secondary shields. So that all sounds really nice. Engineers got a very, very solid buff. From what I'm hearing, they're still not up to tactical levels of damage output, but still it is a very solid buff. They're right there up below tacticals. Science captains, I think, got the short end of the stick, although they did get a few nice things. But one thing was taken out. Initially, Cryptic had said they were going to add a new ability for science captains called Deflector Overload. I was really looking forward to that. I thought it was perfect for science captains because that Deflector Overload gave a huge buff to exotic damage, Drain X, Control X. That would have been perfect right up the alley of science captains, but for whatever reason, Cryptic took that away and just added a damage buff to Scattering Field. So now Scattering Field, in addition to giving you an all damage resistance, and also your teammates that are within range get this as well. They give you an all damage resistance now, and then also a category 2 damage bonus. So it's kind of nice. It's kind of like attack pattern, like a slightly weaker attack pattern alpha, but for your whole team that is within range of the Scattering Field. I mean, so definitely it's a solid upgrade, but I was really hoping to get that Deflector Overload. I thought that sounded really good, and would have made science captains actually the best at doing science powers. It just makes a lot of sense. I don't know why Cryptic took that away. That Deflector Overload ability was going to replace Subnucleonic Beam, but that didn't happen. So Subnucleonic Beam is still just a captain ability for science, just like it has been. Yes, one thing about Subnuke Beam, it did get a little bit of a buff where it will decrease the damage output on the target, so it's a bit of a damage buff, or damage debuff. Makes it a little bit useful in PvE perhaps, but still very deadly in PvP, so that's a good thing. Photonic Fleet got what looks like a pretty negligible buff, where that it will have its, well, it had its damage increased. I haven't seen by how much yet, and I don't know if it really scales, or what it scales with, you know, if it scales with EPG or not. But it also has a higher chance of summoning a battleship at rank 2. Oh, okay, so that's not a big deal. But it's... Photonic Fleet does need some help. Maybe if they gave like all of the fleet ships something like attack pattern beta, and that would help you by debuffing some targets, maybe that would be something that it could bring that would make it a little more useful. But unfortunately, it's still, I don't know, I don't think it's quite where it needs to be yet. And Science Fleet, did get some nice little buffs. It does also give you, I don't know if it did this before. Did it always give Drain X and Control X? I'm not sure. But those are the captain changes, guys. I just wanted to mention those before jumping into the build here and updating it to the new, you know, based on the new Season 13 balance changes. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in now. So I think all the captain careers have something to look forward to here. Tactical may still be the top DPS, just because they get, you know, attack pattern alpha and go down fighting, whereas, you know, the other ones now, the other careers kind of have something now. They'll bring them up to kind of where attack pattern alpha was, right? Because the engineers will get the EPS power transfer, and science captains will get the scattering field now with the damage buff. So they're a little more competitive on that scale, but they don't have anything that really competes with go down fighting as far as damage goes. So I think this patch is actually good. I think this is one of the things I really liked in the balance changes, was the improvements to the science and engineering. Although I think science did get the short end of the stick because they missed out on that deflector overload ability, which I thought looked great. All right, so let's get into the build here. So let's say you have a ship. You just logged in for the first time in Season 13. You've got this meta build, and you want to update it now. So let's go through what would you change, and what are some good choices based on, you know, everything, all the item changes, all the skill changes, everything that's happened with Season 13. You know, what should we update here in our build? Just remembered something. Sorry. Hold that thought. We'll get right into the build in a second here, but one of the cool features also in the Season 13 that I forgot to mention is, in my previous video, but this is actually really, really cool, is that you now have an account. So if you pull up the Dilithium store, right? Pull up the Dilithium store. There's a new tab here for account starship trait unlocks. This is awesome. Basically, the way this works, if you bought like a C-Store ship on your Federation character, then your other faction characters will actually have access to that starship trait. Is that awesome or what? In fact, this one right here, Emitter Synergy, I believe this is the one you get from the Scryer? Because I do have the Scryer on my Fed, and that's something that I haven't been able to get on my Romulan, and this is actually a nice trait if you're going for, you know, exotic damage build. So I was looking forward to this one. So that's actually really cool. In fact, I'm going to go ahead. Let's go ahead and claim it here. Yep, there it is. Boom. Starship trait unlock. Emitter Synergy. So let's go to my traits, Starship traits. So that's awesome. I never had Emitter Synergy on my Romulan and Klingon characters, and that's going to be fantastic now. Emitter Synergy, there it is. So that's fantastic. Definitely take advantage of that if you got some alts, and you have a C-Store ship that's faction specific. You'll now be able to, on your alts, be able to claim that starship trait. That's pretty cool. All right, so yeah, just wanted to mention that. So let's get back into the build here. So here is a sort of what I would call the previous meta build, right? So we got dual beam banks up front. This is anti-proton. You've got dual beam banks with pen mod up front. You've got omnidirectionals in the rear. You've got Iconian 4-piece, all very meta. In our science consoles, we've got, of course, the ever-famous plasma-generating weapon signature consoles, basically the plasma exploders. In our Engineering, we've got some universals. We've, of course, got the Plasmonic Leech, Regenerative Integrity Field, the Kobali console for some extra survivability. Now, on this particular ship, I did actually run the Valdor console because it gets a set bonus here along with the ablative hazard shielding that comes along with the ship. And of course, I just should say it, the ship is the Fleet Mogai Heavy Warbird Tier 6. I actually did a build video on this way long time ago. And so basically, this was the old meta, right? This pretty standard build here. Looking over at my skills, I've had Temporal Operative as my primary. And then, of course, Strategist as my secondary. Of course, because of the awesome, this would be, of course, an attrition warfare build, so I'd be running in threat stance. If we go over here to my bridge officer abilities, I would, of course, be running Feedback Pulse because it was, very OP in preseason 13. It would also, there was also traits that would go along with Feedback Pulse. Actually, the improved Feedback Pulse trait is still pretty good. I've been tempted to play around with that and see if Feedback Pulse is still worth running just for that trait. But yes, and now of course I'd be running 2 copies of Override Subsystem Safeties because this is an Intel ship. I would have, of course, Beamfire at Will 3. I'd have 1 copy of each of my tactical abilities because thanks to Attrition Warfare over here, I had lots of cooldown reduction while I was in threat stance. I'd be getting, tons of damage from my Feedback Pulse being in threat stance. Everything would be firing on me. You'd have everything, all your cooldowns being up, pegged at your global cooldown, so you'd have permanent 100% uptime on like all of your tactical abilities. You'd only need to run 1 copy of each. You'd of course run emergency power to weapons, so you can get your emergency weapon cycle trait. You only need 1 copy of that. You'd run a heal, like for example Ox to Sif, because Ox to Sif would proc your attrition warfare and give you all that wonderful cooldown reduction. So very much a standard meta build, right? So a lot has changed. So let's go through, update this based on all of the changes. So I'm just going to do this right here live. We'll go through, update everything step by step. Start here with the items. What should we replace? What should we keep? What's still good? What, and just go through the whole thing. I'll go through my skills as well. I did change up my build. I did use my free respec already in this character, so I can't really do this right now live. But I will try to explain my skill build that I am using. This seems to be one of the more popular ones. A lot of people seem to be moving to the tactical ultimate this time around. I do like it, and I will mention because the tactical tree also got some nice little buffs on the side as well, because now the shield pen is nice, and they upgraded the crit severity skill as well. So it did get a nice couple upgrades. I could see why people are definitely going down this tree, along with the nerfs to the Science Ultimate, making that a little less appealing. I can see why people are going this route. That said, I'm still not 100% sold on the Tactical Ultimate. I still miss the Science Ultimate in some situations. But I will explain why I spec'd out my skills as I did, but I'm not going to re-spec it right here live because I have very limited respec tokens and I already used my free one, so I'd like to do a little more testing with this current build before I change it up. Alright, so let's start in with the build here. So weapons. What should we do now with weapons? Well, there were a lot of changes to weapons. So So you got your choice, right? You can run with beams if you want to go with the beams and beam fire at will type build. You could go with cannons and go with the cannon scatter volley type build, or you could go with torps. Now I don't know a lot about torps, so I won't be able to speak too much to it, but just a few things that I've just from doing research on the patch notes, and what people have been saying on Reddit. The Stowe Builds subforum on Reddit is an excellent resource. I recommend you go there if you have any questions. So I will try to relay what I've researched, but let's break it down a little bit here. So what changed about beams? Are the beams still good? Well, they are still good, but they are nerfed. So Fire at Will was in fact nerfed. It now has a reduction in the damage bonus it gives. It now has a reduction in the procs that it would cause, because one of the OP things about Beam Fire at Will in the old days is that it would actually proc weapon on hit effects a lot more than it should have. So that's been nerfed. And they also gave it a bit of an accuracy penalty. So there's some nerfs there. But don't worry, beams are in good company, because cannons and torps have also been pretty significantly nerfed. So basically all 3 weapon types have been nerfed across the board. Based on what I've seen from people who've been doing testing on Tribble, you're looking at probably a 20 to 30% overall nerf to those, to Beam Fire at Will, Cannon Scatter Volley. And as far as torps go, they got some serious nerfs as well, in the form of Omega Kinetic Shearing now is nerfed into the ground, and that was a huge source of torp damage. So that's a little bit unfortunate, although there are still some good torps out there. We'll talk about that a little bit, but because I do actually want to use a torp in my build. So Cannon Scatter Volley got a similar treatment, where it got an accuracy modifier and the damage, a reduction to the damage bonus. But overall, cannons I think actually made out a little bit better than beams. Heavy cannons, if I go over here, I do have some anti-proton dual heavy cannons. These got a little buff in the fact that the natural plus 10% crit severity that you get from dual heavies, that was actually fixed, so it'll actually work with cannon weapon abilities like Cannon Scatter Volley. So that's actually a bit of a natural buff to dual heavy cannons. I think that, in my opinion, that kind of puts dual heavy cannons sort of on top. At least that's my impression so far from the build, from the changes. So I think I'm going to go with a cannon build here, and I do want to use 1 torp. So I'm going to take out my beams. Like I said, beams are still good. You can still do a Beam Fire at Will build. There's no problem there, but it will be doing a lot less than it used to. And now that dual heavy cannons have been fixed, and their 10% damage severity or crit severity bonus is being calculated properly, I think they are actually going to be quite good now. So I'm going to go with dual heavies with pen mod. I don't have perfect mods. I do have a damage 3 pen. That's perfect, but these other ones are not perfect. But I'm going to go ahead and slot 3 dual heavies here. I have 3 dual heavies with pen mod. I'm sticking with the anti-proton damage for now, because honestly that's what I have right now as far as dual heavy cannons. I don't have nearly as many cannons upgraded to gold as I do a beam, so I'll stick with it here. Alright, so now the next question is, I want to put a torp in here, and the reason I want to use a torp now is because now that I'm probably not going to be using Feedback Pulse, because Feedback Pulse was heavily nerfed in season, in the changes. I mean, if you read in the patch notes, now it does not, you cannot benefit from damage bonuses on the outgoing damage that's reflected. It now has a different damage, or it reflects the same damage type. The damage, just the base damage was nerfed. I mean, everything about Feedback Pulse was nerfed, so it just does not do much damage anymore on its own. But one thing that was nice about Feedback Pulse is it synergized well with this trait right here that I used to run, Improved Feedback Pulse. And this would make it so, when you're taking fire and Feedback Pulse is up, you would get a pretty large crit chance and crit severity buff. You can see it would happen once every second and stacks up to 10. So that would give you 10% crit and 50% crit severity, basically when you were under fire. Plus it would also buff Feedback Pulse damage back in the day when it was actually good. So that means if we get rid of Feedback Pulse, we're going to be missing out on some crit here. And what I like, there's another trait in here that I liked a lot back when it came out with the flagships, because you get this starship trait from the flagship bundle. Where is it? It's not weapon system synergy, it's the supercharged, there it is. Supercharged weapons. So this one when this trait is slotted, firing a torpedo will stack this supercharge buff. And this firing a torpedo will grant 1 stack of the supercharge. This will give you 10% damage for 20 seconds. It'll give you some 1.5 crit severity and 6.6 crit or crit chance, and then 6.6 crit severity. And I believe it stacks 3 times. And actually, if you do a torp spread, it will actually stack up all 3 right away, because if you fire out, multiple torpedoes, it will stack up right away. So this, I'm thinking this will kind of fill in my space and bring my crit back up by getting rid of feedback pulse. All right, that's why I want to have a torpedo. Now, I've decided that I want a torpedo. Which one is good? Well, I think that depends a little bit on your build. So let's talk a little bit about what torpedoes have done well in Season 13 and which have been pretty heavily hit. Now, the torpedoes that seem to be performing very well right now are the... I don't have one on this character. But the gravimetric. The gravimetric torpedo you get... is it? No, it's not counter command. It's... was it Delta? Where are you, gravimetric? Neutronic. No, Delta was neutronic, that's right. Counter command was a Dyson. Aha, gravimetric. So there you go. This one is actually performing very well, and it got a little bit of a hidden buff now where it will always proc the little gravity well that it spawns. Used to be it only had a chance to proc it, but now it will always proc it. So that's actually really good. In particular, if you are sticking with a science build or a science torp build, go with the gravimetric. It is actually fantastic now and performing very well. It always was a good torpedo, but now it's just even better. It's doing really great. Along with that, the particle emission plasma torpedo is still doing quite well. Do I have a PEP? I might have moved that over to my alt. But plasma emission particle, those are the crafted ones. You can get those off the exchange. Those are performing very well still as well. So those are ones you could consider, those two. Also, the quantum phase, still very good. In fact, drain builds are actually doing quite well because Tychon's Rift was buffed. Tychon's Rift and Energy Siphon, 2 science abilities, were buffed. And quantum phase is still a good torpedo. So if you want to run a drain build, that still seems to be a fairly viable option that a lot of people are running. You could go with a quantum phase torpedo up here and get the 2-piece, run either like the console or the cannon, the dual heavy cannon with that set, and get the bonus there for your drain. So that would be a really good option for a torpedo. So I think those are kind of 3 main ones. But those are kind of more if you are going towards like a science type build or a science hybrid type build. What I think I'm going to go with here and what I'm going to recommend is an energy torpedo. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in my crystalline energy torpedo here because it is anti-proton damage and it will benefit from my tactical consoles, which are all anti-proton damage buffing. So that's what I would recommend there. But also another good option if you're running disruptors or coalition disruptors, the Nausicaan energy torpedo, which is disruptor based, but is also, it counts as an energy torpedo, behaves very similar to the crystalline energy torpedo. It would be a good option there. So those were the ones I'd recommend as far as running a torpedo. And like I said, I like to run the torpedo just because of that supercharged weapon trait, and that gives me that extra crit chance, crit bonus, and damage bonus that I'm kind of missing out on by getting rid by the massive nerf to feedback pulse, right? And the feedback pulse trait, you're losing some of its value because feedback pulse itself is a lot less effective. I did mention coalition disruptors there. From my understanding now that I can tell from the consensus is that coalition disruptors are still the best energy type out there, but they are not by the huge margin that they used to be. The proc from the coalition disruptors was nerfed, so it won't stack as many times now. I don't remember the exact amount, but it will stack a lot less and cap out now. So maybe 5 stacks I think is the max now. So while it still is the best, it is not by such a huge margin anymore. So most of the other energy types, just go with any old energy type. As long as you have a pen mod on there, you're still going to be getting great performance, with this patch. And of course, damage and crit D are still the preferred, other weapon mod. And you can still, accuracy, and even though, as I mentioned, even though Beamfire at Will and Cannon Scatter Volley are getting those accuracy debuffs, I still wouldn't go with like an accuracy mod, because when you get your weapon to epic, you're going to get the accuracy / damage mod anyway at epic. That's probably enough, along with if you spec a little bit into the accuracy in the skill tree as well. That's probably enough to keep you at near 100% hit on your Beamfire at Will and Cannon Scatter Volley. So you just stick with pretty much the same mods you had before. Pen still the best, damage and crit D next best, and then after that, crit hit and accuracy are just still not that great. And Coalition Disruptors still come out on top, but not by a huge margin. So don't worry about it too much if you don't have Coalition Disruptors. So, all right, so that's what we're going to go with. So we've got our dual heavy cannons. And we've got our crystalline energy torpedo here. All right, so we've got, let's also work with our aft here. So now that we're not going to be using beams, I'm going to take out my omnidirectionals here. And of course, slap in some turrets. All right. Of course, these are just anti-proton turrets with pen. Again, not perfect mods, as you can see. It's just damage to crit D. I just try to go for some mix of crit D, and damage, and just try to avoid accuracy and hit. Getting perfect mods is just way too expensive even for me, so I just don't try to go all the way there. Just having some mix of crit D and damage will probably do you fine. All right, so that is the weapons, and hopefully that helps clear up a few things on as far as what you should still be going towards for your weapons, weapon mods, damage types, energy types, and torpedoes. All right. So let's keep going here. So we talked about, so we talked about weapons. Let's talk about our space set. So, is Iconian set still good? Is it still the top set out there? In my opinion, yes. Although it is nerfed from where it used to be, and there is some competition for sure. One thing I still like about the 4-piece Iconian set is that Radiant Subatomic Pulse Clicky that you get. Let me go ahead and pull up the info here so we can take a look at the set bonuses. All right, so what happened to the set bonuses? Well, the 3 set bonus for Iconian did get nerfed. It only stacks up to 3 times now. That's a pretty big nerf, because there used to be, I believe, a bug where it was stacking 3 times per member of your group. So it was actually stacking up a lot more than it is now. So it's not quite as potent as it used to be. But even then, it still is a pretty solid buff. A lot of other sets out there get some damage buffs as well, but this one is still, I think, pretty competitive. So you're still going to want at least one member of your team to have this. And since I usually do pickup groups, I'm still fine running this. So yeah, I still like the Iconian set. I still love the 4-piece clicky, and I think now that like, for example, a lot of like the cooldowns now for your captain abilities are going to be increased. You're going to have a lot less uptime on a lot of your abilities. That that's part of why the overall damage has been knocked down so much with this patch. Is just having so much less uptime on your abilities, less uptime on your captain abilities. I think that places, at least in my opinion, that makes clickies more and universal consoles, that have clicky abilities that buff your damage. I think that makes them more useful, because you're going to have to weave them now with your captain abilities to try to keep your your damage buff going. This is still a great clicky. Still gives it to your whole team, and it gives you a 33% all damage, max hull, and flight speed. So still a great little clicky. I love it. So I still like the Iconian set, even though it has been toned down. Now, one other thing that has been pretty significantly toned down is the hot restarts. So the hot restarts now have, there's basically now an internal cooldown. So can only occur once per every 60 seconds. And I believe that is per subsystem. So, so if it hot restarts, if the warp core, for example, hot restarts your, what does this do? Weapons. Yeah, so it hot restarts your weapon. There's a 60-second lockout before this hot restart will trigger again. Now, I believe the shield will hot restart your shield. Yeah, so the shields will hot restart your shield. So both of these could proc. Like if your shields go offline, this will proc. And then right afterwards, if your weapons go offline, this will proc. But then they'll have those two subsystems will have a 60-second lockout before it will proc again. Yep. So I think Iconian is still my preferred set, but I do want to discuss a few options because there are a few things that people are recommending now. In particular, one that I've seen a lot of people using is a two-piece Nukara. Because let me get info on here. You'll see that the two-piece Nukara is now a 5% all weapon damage. That is category 2. That's pretty fantastic. And this also does come with sort of its own weapon hot restart. So it's pretty cool. It's a nice little two-piece set. You could put like the deflector and impulse perhaps as Nukara. Then you could probably swap out the warp core. Some people I've seen are going back to the Terran warp core / singularity core because now with the nerfs to plasmatic leech, it's harder to get your weapons, all your subsystem power up. And that makes the Terran warp core, which gives you that up to 5 to all your subsystems, that makes that a little bit more valuable. So people have been going with the Terran warp core. That's another option. As far as shields, I still like the Iconian. I think it's great because it still does give you the shield hot restart, which is good. Some people are now also switching to the Mako shield, which is another good option. The Mako shield does now stack with the plasmatic leech. So even though plasmatic leech was nerfed, at least now if you combine it with the Mako shield, they will stack with each other. Instead of in the old days where they used to like interfere with each other and would completely screw each other over. They continually overwrite each other and then you wouldn't get anything. But now they will stack. So that's another consideration you can make. So you could, something you could do is make maybe two-piece Nukara, Mako shield, and Terran warp core. That could be a good combination. So yeah, lots of good options out there. The Romulan engines are still good for for the attack pattern buff. That's something that you could always consider as well. But I might try that. I might try the two-piece Nukara, Terran, and Mako and see how that goes. That could actually be good, particularly on like a Romulan, because Romulans have, of course, even more power issues, and the plasmatic leech hit is pretty significant now. So that affects Romulans quite a bit because of their lower power levels. I'll talk a little bit more about plasmatic leech in a minute, because we're almost getting down to the consoles here in our build. But so my consensus is I'm just going to stick with Iconian. But if you know you're going to be in a group with someone who already has the Iconian, you probably would want to swap it out. And like I said, if you do swap it out, go with the Nukara two-piece, Terran warp core, and Mako shield. That might do you quite well. Maybe there's some other better options out there as people continue to explore, what's available now. So that's pretty easy. I'm just going to stick with my Iconian for now. I did talk about this in the previous video in Season 13 now that all escorts, well, I guess what's the right way to do it? Any ship that has 7 weapon slots, a tactical captain, and 1 or fewer hangar bays now has this new heavy weapon slot. In here, I just put in, I don't have any of the new special heavy weapons. You can get a new special heavy weapon from the new competitive war game reputation. But this one is just kind of the default one. You can get this right from the dilithium store, right here in Reclaim. Yeah, you could get it right there. So, and it's actually pretty decent. I've been doing some testing on this. It's not half bad. I have not even gilded it out yet. It's just Mark 14, very rare right now. I'm not going to bother investing into this yet. I want to do a little more research and see what what heavy escort weapons are coming out here in the near future before I fully upgrade one. And in any case, I'll be waiting till the next upgrade weekend before I go through and do that. So, but even just at Mark 14, this is doing pretty solid damage. Devices, nothing here has changed for me. I'm just continuing along with the Temporal Negotiator to help with cooldowns. Again, probably a little more valuable now, back from the old Delta Recruit event. Red Matter Capacitor, pretty easy to get now with just wait until the next Phoenix prize pack comes out, and you should be able to get one of these without too much problem. Subspace Field Modulator, just nice for when you need that all damage resistance clicky. You just get that playing through the story arcs. No changes there. Now, down to the consoles. So there's a lot to consider here. This was actually really difficult of, how to go with this here. But one thing I should just mention now that's the elephant in the room is that the plasma generating weapon consoles are now officially garbage. They are complete garbage. Get rid of them, unslot them. They are worthless. The damage they output is incredibly low, and the proc has been nerfed into craziness where they proc so little now, it's not even worth your time. That is a big change. That's a profound change. I don't know if Cryptic fully appreciated how big of a change this is, because the meta was so focused around these plasma generating consoles that it even affected like ship preferences. Like, for example, ships with more science consoles were heavily preferred over ships that don't have them. And that, affected people's buying decision. They may have bought ships that have more science consoles. And in fact, if you look at, for example, lockbox ships, typically lockbox ships have more science consoles than your faction type ships. That is now not really as much of a consideration. I mean, outside of unless you're going for like a pure science build, your science consoles just have lost a lot of value. In fact, that's why I went back to my good old Fleet Mogai. Fleet Mogai is not really I kind of had put this ship on the shelf because it is outshined by other ships that have more science consoles. Like, for example, I was using the Fleet Fayette for a while. The Fleet Fayette has 3 science consoles. I still love the Fayette, but I said, well, now that science console, the plasma consoles are so nerfed, why not go back and try the Fleet Mogai again? Now, I know some people might say, hey, that's good, you're trying good things. Now ships with fewer science consoles are decent again. And while that's true, also the reverse is true. So that means the ships with more science consoles are not really that any much better. So it just kind of shifted now what are the preferred ships for, at least for non-science characters, right? If you're not going for a science build, the number of science consoles is not really a consideration anymore. So let's get rid of these pieces of garbage. Now, what do we put in their place? That's kind of a big question. Now, if you're going for a science, if you want to continue on with a full science build, I would recommend going with the Fleet Research Lab consoles. Those are a little bit better now because those consoles actually come with 2 modifiers instead of 1 modifier like the current plasma consoles do. So you can actually get, if you go to your Fleet Research Lab, you can actually get consoles there that they come with like this little small damage buff that procs, but you can actually get them with 2 mods, so you can get like a Drain X and an EPG on the same console, or you can get, I think even some of the consoles have like Drain X 2. That would be pretty sweet. If you're going for like a drain build, I would definitely recommend going with the Fleet Research science consoles. That's what I'd recommend to put in their place if you're going for a science build. Now, if you're not going for a science build, and I'm not here on my tactical character, I'm definitely going back to just a good old-fashioned weapon damage build with some torps. I think that just go with putting universals in here, honestly. This might be a good opportunity if you have some console sets from your, like if you purchase some C-Store ships, might be a good chance to actually run one of those console sets. For example, the flagship consoles, if you have the flagship sets like the Odysseys, the Tier 6 Odyssey, if you're a Federation side, or if you have the Romulan Tier 6 Scimitars, those ships have an excellent console set. That might actually be worth, if you have some extra science console slots now, that might be worth putting in there and actually completing out maybe the 3 or 4 piece set. And I know the 4 piece set combines with this console over here for the flagships. In fact, let's go ahead and get info on it because you'll see. This console here, which is the timeline stabilizer. This is from the Krenum science vessel from the winter event a while ago. It wasn't this past one, at least on a PC. That was actually from the previous winter event. But if you have this console, and you combine that, if you're running a flagship or an Odyssey, that you could combine that with the 3 other consoles, which are actually all really good. Except maybe the science one's not quite the best one, but they are actually very good, and you get a nice, you get the flagship technologies 4-piece set bonus. Now that you're not running all those plasma consoles, maybe you got room now to actually slot all 4 of those, and that might be a good option. So that's a good option. Just see if there's any console sets out there that you have, maybe you never used before because you didn't have console slots with plasma consoles being used. Other options are just use some of the good old traditional universal consoles out there. For example, is Plasmatic Leech? Do you still want to run this one? Now, this is Universal Console. It has been heavily nerfed in Season 13, so you could get this, even with just a little bit of investment in Drainax, you could get this so it would give you 15, 16 power in every subsystem. That has been heavily nerfed now. Basically, the max you can get, I believe, is 7.5? Yeah. 7.75 power per stack, and you can stack 10 times now, and it does not scale. So basically, the Plasmatic Leech is going to give you 7.5 energy to all of your subsystems while you're firing your weapons. That is a very significant nerf, but in my opinion, particularly for Romulans, it's still a very good console. I mean, no other console is still going to give you that much power to all 4 subsystems. So I think it's still worth slotting, even though it is very much less powerful than it was. It's going to be pretty hard, once again, if you have, for example, if you have an amp bonus on your warp core, it's going to be hard to get all 4 of your power levels up to 75 without some other ways to buff your power. Now, engineers, on the other hand, engineers maybe could get away without running the Plasmatic Leech because they have some nice abilities to keep their power levels up, and they have that some of those personal traits as well that help with that. All right, so Plasmatic Leech still good. I would definitely recommend it, even though it's even in its nerf state. Now, another popular universal console from the day is the Kobali console, or also called the Regenerative Integrity Field. This was heavily nerfed as well. I mean, it's still okay as a healing console. It still gives you that hull healing bonus, gives you a chunk of healing, but the amount of healing you get from outgoing weapon damage has been significantly reduced, so it's not quite as good as it was. So you could probably swap that out unless you're having some major survivability issues. A console you could swap in its place is actually the recent one from the Lucari vessel. Let's see. Oh yeah, that would be. I don't have one sitting here. I think I have it slotted on another ship right now. But if I pull up the event reputation store, or no, the account reclaim. The account reclaim. It should be. Oh, I have to reclaim the ship, don't I, to get it? Okay, well, I'm not going to do that right now, but the Lucari Science Console from the last winter event would be another good option to slot if you need some survivability. As a Romulan character, the Valdor console, also known as the Shield Absorptive Frequency Generator, is coming back into a little bit of popularity. I think this might again be useful just because of now with less survivability and uptime on your abilities. This would be a good option for regenerating your shield. Now that you have more console slots open, might be worth slotting this again. I am actually using this. I think it is definitely, if you're going to go with a Fleet Mogai, it is very much worth slotting this because it gives you a 2-piece set bonus with the Fleet Mogai. The console that comes with actually comes with the Morrigu, but you could slot it into your Fleet Mogai. Let's get info on it here. This is actually a very, very good 2-piece set bonus. It gives you 5 weapon power, which is good because of all the nerfs to power to power systems, and it gives you also 25 resistance to power drain and 25% power cost. That's actually really good. So that's going to help pretty significantly, particularly as a Romulan, to manage your weapons power, try to keep it high. One system change I should mention while I have weapons power. They did change how weapons power scaling is calculated, all right? Basically now, if you're at 100 weapons power, it's the same as it used to be before the patch. But now, if you are above 100 weapon power, the damage scales up more slowly. And if you're below 100 weapons power, the damage scales down more slowly. So it's if you're actually running lower than 100 weapons power, it is actually a buff. And if you're running above 100 weapons power, it is a little bit of a nerf. So basically the scaling was kind of reduced. So if you're at 100, it's the same, but if you differentiate from 100, whether you're going above or below, the amount of damage increase or decrease has been reduced. I think this will help some new players. I think a lot of new players don't even know to set their weapons power high. This will help them a bit. But otherwise, for anyone overcapping your power, it is a slight... it is a fair nerf to, if you're getting up to like 150 plus weapons power with, override subsystem safeties going, it is less of a damage buff. And it does also, like if you're running, the new EPS power transfer as an engineer, it also affects that as well. So it is not quite as much of a damage buff as you would have gotten before the patch. Just keep that in mind. So, all right, so that is what I'm going to go with here. So I would recommend, now that you have some extra slots, go in and see if your ship has any set bonuses that are good that maybe you didn't slot before because those slots weren't available, and fill in the rest with other universal consoles. I'll go through a few more options here, and if you want to go with a science build, I would say go with the fleet research consoles for science builds. So what are some other good options here? Good universal consoles that I still think are great. The Timeline Stabilizer is still a fantastic console. I'm definitely going to go with this one. It always was a great console. It gives so many great little buffs. It gives you recharge speed, recharges all of your bridge officer and captain abilities while it's running. That's also great now with all the loss of recharge time and the loss of attrition warfare. Recharge time is a lot more valuable, so that's good. It gives you the firing cycle haste. That's good. It gives you the turn rate. It gives you everything. So it's still a very good clicky, and its passive is just the 50% cooldown on all science bridge officer abilities. Also a good passive. So a great console to still consider. Another one you could go with that is relatively new is this one, the Dynamic Power Redistributor. This is a very good console that was released. What was the name of that lockbox? I think the Undiscovered lockbox. This is the console that comes with the Federation Temporal Dreadnought. There was the Atlas. And this console is actually available to Klingon and Romulan characters fairly cheap on the exchange, because not super cheap, but reasonably cheap, probably 10 to 20 million. but it is a pretty good console. Unfortunately, if you want to get it on a Federation character, you're going to actually have to buy the Atlas ship, which is way more expensive to get this console. So it'll be very hard for Federation characters to get it, but for Klingon and Romulan characters, I would recommend this console as a universal console to fill in its place. It is still very good. It gives you that nice, huge damage bonus while your health is above 80%. While that click, it lasts for 20 seconds as well, which is nice and long. And it gives you also the damage resistance rating and a hull regen, pretty significant hull regen while this is running. So it's actually a good survivability and damage console. And the passives are decent too. It gives you the 2.5% energy damage and the 11.2 all damage resistance. So it gives you some passive bonuses there. What are some other good options? You could always go back to the tried and true, especially for new players. It's very easy to get your hands on this one, the assimilated module. It's still decent, still gives you a crit chance, crit severity, weapon power, hull regen, and it gives you control expertise, which is not bad if you're running gravity well or something along those lines. Still a decent console. Another good one is I've seen actually people even going back to the 0-point energy console because this gives you the +2 to all power subsystems. Again, now that the plasmonic leech is so nerfed, a lot of people are trying to get power any way they can. So that's a good one. Yeah, 0-point energy. That's another one. You get that one from the Romulan reputation. Some other good ones, if you're running anti-proton, the polymorphic probe array is decent because it gives you a +25% anti-proton damage and control expertise, and it gives you the little Iconian probes that you can launch from it that are kind of cool. Not a very expensive console. Also, if you have the crystalline absorption matrix, again, if you're running anti-proton, this is another option, because this buffs anti-proton damage and energy damage resistance rating. And actually, the clicky on this is a +500 energy damage resistance rating, and it does a little bit of damage as well, but it's actually a pretty good survivability clicky. That's another good option if you're running anti-proton. And here's the one that I'm going to go with. This is another good option, the Temporal Disentanglement Suite. You actually get this from an episode, and I'm sorry I don't remember the name of the episode, so it is easy to get. This one actually is a science console. It's not a universal, but if you should have some science consoles opening up now if you're getting rid of your plasma exploders. So I think this is the build that I am going to go with here, because this is a really good one because it gives you aux power, again really needed with the lack of power now, and it also gives you a scaling up crit chance and crit severity bonus, so pretty solid, and gives you a max shield capacity as well. That actually goes really well with when you're running the Valdor console, because the shield healing it gives you is pretty significant, and so you don't really need shield regen, but the shield capacity is helpful because you will be getting the heals up to your capacity. So I think, and it gives you that also a 3% shield resistance, basically shield hardness. So pretty solid console all around, not bad. Now there are other consoles. There are a lot of other options you can fit in here. I know a lot of people who are running you could put the Nausicaan if you want to run if you're to have a disruptor build. I would go with the Nausicaan console. That's a good option because you can run that Nausicaan console along with the Nausicaan Energy Torpedo with a disruptor build. Let me go in and get info on this. Yeah, here it is, Nausicaan Siphon Capacitor. It is actually a science console as well, so again, now you should have some science consoles freed up. This has actually some good set bonuses for disruptors and for Drain X, I believe. And it even has this Starship Hull Pen if you do the 3-piece, which is actually a really good 3-piece set. That's another option you could run, so you could run Nausicaan. If you're running, of course, Quantum Phase, there's a console for the Quantum Phase as well you could run, particularly if you're running phaser damage and the Quantum Phase Torpedo and a Drain X build, that'd be good for that. Any other consoles here that I can think of that I didn't mention? I think that covers, some good options there. Basically, look for console sets that you may have never filled out before. Look for universal consoles, like the ones I've been listing here, and some of the set bonuses you can get from the various episodes, the featured episodes that you can replay and get the 3-piece set bonus, like the Nausicaan, like the Quantum Phase. Those are still very good. Even the Lucari set might be good. The set bonuses from that. Right, so that pretty much covers the consoles, guys. I know that went on a bit long. Hopefully that was a little bit helpful as to what you can fit in now that you can get rid of the plasma exploders. That is a big change. All right, so tactical consoles, I'm just sticking with the tried and true here. I'm just going with the good old vulnerability locators. Go with, the energy type. You get these from your Fleet Spire. Get the one that matches the energy type of you're going for. So anti-proton in my case, and they give you the crit chance. Still good consoles to slot in here. All right, so that is the main part of the build here. Let's go ahead and move over to skills. Now, I did actually in my previous video cover the changes to the ultimates. Let me just quickly go through it here again. So the engineering ultimate was slightly buffed. It has a new modifier now called, which one is it? A Blade of Corruption? Yes, a Blade of Corruption, which now applies a healing debuff of, I believe it's 50% to the target. That's kind of cool. Basically think of it as Mortal Strike from Warcraft for against other spaceships. So you could apply this to an enemy and it will have all their healing. Probably a decent PvP skill. I still don't know how useful it would be in PvE, so I really wouldn't recommend the engineering ultimate at this point still. Seems to be the least popular even with the changes. So what happened to the science ultimate? Well, the science ultimate, probability manipulation, this got a bit of a change. It lost the probability window enhancement, which increased the duration. And that's a problem because it significantly reduces the uptime of this ability. I believe with that, you could have, what is it, almost like a 1/3 uptime. And without that, you're looking at like a 1/6 uptime. So, or it can only be up 1/6 of the time. So that's pretty significant nerf. But I have to admit, since I respect over here to a tactical ultimate, I do miss this because the one thing I still like about the science ultimate is that it's a buff on you. So you always get it for that full 15 seconds, whereas the other two buffs are a targeted debuff on the enemy, and so you have to apply it to an enemy, and if that target dies, that you just wasted your ultimate. So it's only really good on those really hardened targets, like maybe like Attack Cube or Unimatrix or Crystalline Entity, whatever it may be. So it is still good. It's just, a lot of queues out there don't have that many hardened targets, or if you're just doing like patrols and episodes and that type of stuff, there's not like that one big target that you need you need like the tac ultimate or the engineer ultimate to take down. So if you're just taking out lots of smaller targets, I still think the science ultimate is the way to go, and I do miss it. And so then that brings us to the tactical ultimate. Works pretty similar to how it was before. It did get a little bit of a nerf and a little bit of a buff. So now the little bit of a buff is that now torpedoes will actually trigger the buffs you can get here. So like Frenzied Assault and Team Frenzy will now trigger from torpedo hits, which is nice. So that's kind of a buff there. But the amount of the firing, the haste you get with the stacks of Frenzy, I believe, was reduced by a fair amount. So Focus Frenzy did get a little bit of a nerf, but I think the reason why more people are going tactical now is not necessarily for Focus Frenzy, but because the actual abilities, there were a few that got buffed. In particular, this one. So this used to be a shield damage bonus, but now it's actually a shield penetration bonus. I forgot what they called it before. But we're like do bonus bonus damage to shield, or like a resistance debuff, kind of similar to how this worked for Hull. But now it's actually a shield penetration bonus, so that means it will give you a penetration, so it will increase the amount of damage going through shields to Hull. That's actually a really nice buff, I think. You can see here if you get it up to max, it gives you basically kind of acts like bleed through, right? So normally if you're running a resilient shield, 5% will bleed through. If you have this spec'd out, then 10% will bleed through. Pretty cool. So that's a nice little buff. Also, this one here, weapon specialization with the crit severity, got a pretty significant buff. Oh, no. This one's the... Here it is, this one, the amplification, right? This is the crit severity bonus. This one is now a 40% crit severity bonus when you max it out, so pretty good. I believe the crit chance one actually did get a little bit of a reduction as well, so that's a little bit unfortunate. And now accuracy is a little more useful because of, you know, the changes to the weapon powers. Yeah, so a lot of people are going tactical now because it did get some buffs, and likewise a lot of things were nerfed in the science, like for example Drain Infection was pretty heavily nerfed. And now I think a lot of people that were tactical captains now are, you know, now that you know, there's been so many nerfs to science abilities and weapon abilities, they're trying to focus more just on buffing up tactical abilities and weapon powers instead of trying to make, you know, more of a hybrid build. So they're just focusing more on this tree. At least that's the impression I get. So let's just go through it here. So why did I choose these points? Why did I spend them the way they are? This is actually fairly cookie cutter. I was trying to go through, you know, Reddit and trying to see what the more popular builds are, but there are a few points that are kind of flexible. But if you do want to get the tactical ultimate, you are going to have to heavily invest here in tactical. You could probably move some of these points around. Like, I've seen people, if you're not going to spec a torpedo at all, you could take three points out and put them here into these three. Get your accuracy and defense maxed out. That's not a big deal, though. I actually like having this here just because I do run torps pretty frequently now. I do like the readiness, especially now, again, with the loss of attrition warfare. Tactical readiness is very useful. Unless you have unlimited resources and you could buy, you know, 3 Zamox, this is going to be very useful to have the tactical readiness. The offensive coordination and stuff is actually a little bit more useful now because of all the buffs to hangar pets. So this is more useful now. So I think there's just so many things that kind of were buffed in the tactical tree that more people are going that way. So that is the build there as far as tactical. As far as science, you know, these two here are still good. The shield restoration still buffs your shield heals, and the shield capacity is still good. I went with capacity just because I'm using the Valdor console on the Romulan side, so that will help a little more than the shield heals, but those are still good too. I did want to still spec into Drain X because I do want to explore some options there with Drain X. And it still has some usefulness, so I did continue with that. I kind of wanted to put some in control expertise as well because I still do use gravity well a lot, and particularly with a cannon build. If you're going from a beam fire at will to a cannon build, you'll notice that it is hard to keep all of the enemies in your cannon scatter volley arc, and gravity well helps a lot with that. So the control expertise could still be good here. I would like to fit that in. I just don't have the points. This is still required for all builds. These two here are just not really that needed. Shield hardness, I mean, it is decent. Shield regeneration is not that great, so not a big loss there. But shield hardness is pretty good. Does give you more resistance on your shields, or negates damage to your shields. So that's still something that's decent. I do miss it. Here, exotic particle gens. I would, of course, like to keep this maxed out because I still may do like a exotic damage build on this character, but just don't have the points. But again, long range targeting is still mandatory pretty much for every build in the entire game. No matter what you're doing, you're going to want all 3 points of this to increase the max range of your weapons. Well, let's put it this way, to decrease the damage fall off you get at max range with your weapons. I think that's a better way to say it. So still good to keep that. Science readiness would still be okay if you wanted to go down that route. Shield mastery is also somewhat decent. I do see people getting this because negating the 1 incoming critical hit is pretty good, especially again PvP. That's still good. Sometimes you are fighting, even though you're fighting elite queues, there are some, you know, like a heavy crit from a torp spread from a command cruiser, you know, from a mirror command cruiser can really hurt. So this can still be decent. But yeah, with going with the full tactical tree, you don't have a lot of options here on the science side. Right. Okay. As far as engineering, these two are still both good. That first point here is actually very valuable, so it's worth it for hull capacity and for hull restoration. That helps your hull heals and your hull capacity, both very good. Here, I do recommend electroplasma systems. EPS is excellent. That's actually, now that speaking of EPS, that's actually, if you are rich and you can afford a conductive RCS with EPS, that would be a very good console to fit in here. Now, with the extra, just going back to the console discussion, you could put it or you could just put a regular EPS console in there, because EPS is still very good. But that is definitely a reason to continue to invest here in the EPS skills. Full impulse energy shunt, it's not really required. I do like to still put 2 points into impulse expertise, just because this really helps your maneuverability when you're at, helps your ship's maneuverability. Especially, I really hate slow turning ships. This helps out a lot, and it's a good thing to have for sure. So the speed and turn rate bonus are very welcome. This is another one that's probably optional. I know people are investing into this a little bit more now that the fleet buff was nerfed, and it is a good skill because it gives you the all damage resistance rating. And if you wanted to go all the way in, you could get these two as well for the energy and then the kinetic resistance rating. This one, I honestly didn't have this when I was going with the full science build, because you do get a little bit more survivability from the science on your shield side, so I didn't really think this was needed. But now that I'm going more heavily into tack, I wanted to pick this up just to help out with survivability. I didn't go for damage control. The regeneration is not a huge deal. These two, again, these are a little more optional. These points probably could be shuffled around, but I still like these just because it gives you shields and aux. So it's basically kind of like 5, just a little under 5 power to all of your subsystems if you pick these two up. I wouldn't go any further though. These only give you 3 power to one system instead of 5 to 2. So probably not worth going all the way. Just stick with the top 2. Here's another one that is good, warp core potential, just flat out 3 to all subsystem power. Maybe this is not worth it, but again, as I'm a Romulan and my power systems are very low, I still want to invest. I want to get it everywhere I can, so I invested for the improved. Warp core efficiency is also still very good, because typically you're going to run with 2 subsystem power at very low levels, and that will give you a plus 10 to those 2 subsystems. So typically you run shield and engines at very low power, and weapons at max, and then whatever else you can fit into aux. So there you go. Engineering readiness also could be very good, although it's not needed in the build that I am using. So when we get to the duty officers, I will go through that. So that is the skill tree I went with. Let's quickly talk about specializations here, because Temporal Operative received a lot of nerfs. This was the meta, right? This was the primary skill that was the meta, or primary specialization that was the meta. And it received some significant nerfs. The heavy hitters here were Entropic Rider was majorly nerfed to now proc only on weapon cycle, not per shot. That is a vast nerf. I mean, this was nerfed by a huge amount, and this is one of the big damage contributors from the Temporal Operative spec tree, so that's a big loss. Also, the causal glitch was nerfed a bit, so the cooldown reduction was reduced. There was something else. I think the firing cycle haste was nerfed. Yeah, I'm trying to remember if there was one other nerf there. But just overall, the temporal tree was pretty significantly nerfed. Honestly, The consensus that I'm hearing is that it's probably not worth it unless you are going for a full-out science build. You may still want to stick with temporal operative, but for most other specs, you're probably going to want to go back to the good old trusty Intel tree. Intel tree is still pretty fantastic. You still get Intel Fleet, which is a great ability. I'm going to go ahead and activate this. It still gives you the flanking, which is, of course, still good. So it's the same old Intel tree, not many changes, honestly, to it. It's just that with the nerfs to temporal, it's not as competitive as it used to be. So it'd be worth checking this out. As far as the secondary, so I mentioned earlier, but attrition warfare, which was the main reason to pick the strategist secondary, has been heavily nerfed. Attrition warfare was fantastic. It would give you this one ability, along with having an available hull heal, would almost and be in threatening stance, would reduce the cooldown on almost all of your abilities down to their global, or their shared cooldown. And that is now nerfed. This attrition warfare is nerfed to a pretty major degree, where it doesn't seem to be worth it anymore. It can only proc once every 30 seconds now, and it gives a lot less recharge reduction even when it does proc. So it's not that great, and it's unfortunate. And that is actually a pretty significant change to builds now, because that's going to mean changing Doff layouts, changing your bridge officers, and changing up quite a bit. And I will get to that just shortly when we get over to the bridge officers, how I adjusted to that. But basically, I mean, it basically means we're kind of going back to the old days here. To try to get recharge reduction, you're going back to the old days with, like all hands on deck trait and reciprocity trait, and maybe even going all the way back to, I know, Aux to Bat. I've been hearing a lot of chatting about Aux to Bat becoming popular again. And I went back to my favorite old standby, which is the Drake build. So I will be showing the Drake build here as soon as we get over to the bridge officer abilities and Doffs. So if you're not using attrition warfare, is strategist still worth it? Well, if you're not going to be in threat stance anymore for the attrition warfare, you still get a few buffs here, right? You get your crit bonus, so you get a 3% crit chance bonus whenever you get a captain or a bridge officer hull heal. You still get a little bit of survivability bonuses, immune to torp damage, so you can ignore a torp. It has a few things going for it if you want the little extra crit, you do also get maneuver warfare, which gives you that when you're not in threatening stance, you get your all damage bonus while while diversionary tactics is going. You get that placate foes, can be a little bit of a lifesaver. So it's still an option. It's not terrible if you want that little bit of extra crit, a little extra survivability. But you could always go back to the good old pilot tree. And I think that's what I am going to do, because pilot has, you've got your good old rock and roll. That still gives you that little bit of a immune to damage immunity when you need it, so on demand. Where you do your roll. It's still good. It also gives you, what is it called? Attack pattern expertise. That's always nice because it gives you the temporary hit points whenever you use your attack patterns. Pretty cool. So pilot is still good. It gives you the little bit of extra maneuverability. So this is still a very good secondary. So I think, yeah, what I'm going to do here is I would recommend just going back to, unless you're going for a pure science build, you could stick with temporal, but otherwise probably go back to Intel primary and go back to pilot secondary. You might want to try strategist and see if you still like it. It still could be a decent secondary. All right, so let's head on over to traits. Now, fortunately, traits is going to be really fast because there are not very many trait changes in the, out of all the different system changes, skill changes, bridge officer changes, everything. Traits were not very much affected, almost at all. Honestly, I can't think of any of Starship traits really that were changed that much. I mean, there was that big nerf to the Starship trait that came with the new vacation escorts, which was unfortunate. I feel sorry for the people who bought those ships because that just got heavily nerfed. but that was a brand new trait anyway. A lot of these old traits here are still pretty much exactly the same as they were. Same with your personal traits, same with your space traits, same with the reputation traits. So I'll just quickly show you what I'm using here, but it didn't really change. I will say this, even though the traits themselves didn't change, the traits that trait priority has probably changed a little bit now, especially because you really need as much cooldown reduction as you can with the loss of attrition warfare. So for me, I'm going to get rid of, so now that feedback pulse is nerfed into the ground, I'm going to get rid of improved feedback pulse, and I'm going to slot back in the good old trusty all hands on deck, because this gives, you know, the recharge reduction time to science bridge officer abilities and captain abilities, which is actually quite nice. So that'll bring your, you know, your hazard emitters back up more. I am going to be running gravity well, so bring your gravity well up more. So it's still a good ability. I like it. And it also reduces captain abilities, which again, not many things do that, so that's handy to have. So I probably will be running all hands on deck again. Reciprocity is another good. I'm going to get rid of particle feedback loop here. I was running that on my hybrid build that I was using in the my tier 6 Vesta hybrid build. So get rid of that. And you know, what should I put in its place? Now, a couple different options. Like I said, you could go back to reciprocity. That is certainly an option, and that's something I will definitely test out. So you could put reciprocity back in here. Again, this will give you your recharge time reduction on intel and tactical. This is very tempting. I might go back to using this. I love this on, because this triggers whenever an enemy misses you. I really love this on my good old beam escort builds, because in beam escort builds, when you're running around at full throttle, you do have a pretty high defense and you'll be missed a lot. So I do like that. For this build, and just because now there's also the, you know, with the new reputation with the competitive war games going on, you have to have a little bit of PvP viability. I think I'm just going to go back to my trusty old invincible here. As I mentioned before, I like supercharged weapons a lot now, because with the loss of the improved feedback pulse, I feel this is a great way to get my crit and crit severity back up along with the weapon damage, and it's easy to stack it up with a torp spread. And I like using the energy torpedoes now, and there's other good torpedoes out there like the, you know, quantum phase and whatnot, gravimetric, that are good now. So I do like this trait. There are, of course, other options you could put in there. But yeah, it just depends on what you're going for. Especially if you're, you know, you could always put improved critical systems in there. This is a very easy to trait to obtain for most. Or was this, actually this was from the temporal recruitment event, wasn't it? Or was this from a episode? Man, I can't remember. I remember this trait. I thought this was a pretty easy to get trait though. It's not super powerful, but it is a nice, just kind of a general use. It does give you the 3% crit and 15% crit severity whenever you activate emergency power abilities, which you will, if you're running a Drake build like me, you will be using those a lot. So, and in fact, I still highly recommend the emergency weapon cycle. It's still very good. You're still going to be using your emergency power to weapons. As a Drake build, you're going to have the permanent uptime on that, so that's still a very good trait. This is still a staple trait. I use this on every build. I almost skipped over it. I'm so used to having this on every build, I pretty much just reflexively skipped over it, but I always have this as the first slot on pretty much every build I run. Unless you're like a pure torp build, this is a very good trait. So yeah, I would still stick with that. Maybe prioritize a couple cooldown reduction traits like all hands on deck and reciprocity. Maybe include some survivability trait in there for the PvP queues. Some traits to get your crit and crit severity up, like supercharged weapons. So, like I said, I've now been switching this over to a cannon build, which means I really want to use Withering Barrage, which extends the duration of cannon scatter volley by 4 seconds. And with the Drake build that I'm using, running 2 copies of cannon scatter volley, this will have 100% uptime, which is very, very good. But again, this is another optional one you could put if you're going for like a beam score build, or superior pedal to the metal is still very good. There are other options out there. Improved critical systems are good. Just use what you can to fill out the rest of your traits. But I think just the takeaway here is you want to start to prioritize again your cooldown reduction traits. Maybe slot those back in. As far as space reputation traits, this is my standard build here. I use this on almost everything. Use precision for the crit chance, advanced targeting systems for the crit severity. You've got your enhanced armor pen for that 5% armor pen. Was there something fixed about this where this would now apply correctly with beam fire at will? I can't remember now if there was something about this. Yeah, I don't recall offhand, but still a very good trait. And I am running the aux power configuration offensive, and I also run the defensive trait just for the little bit of extra survivability. This one you could swap out. There are a couple different options here. This fifth slot here is kind of my flex slot where I can put almost anything in here that I want. Sometimes I go to the nanite. Which one is it? Not nanite. It's the refreak. Is this one energy refrequencer? Yes. So it gives you incoming hull heals based on your energy damage going out. That's a pretty decent one as well. But I usually put kind of a survivability one in there in the final slot. I do really, really like the aux power defense because I will be running high aux power as high as I can anyway. And this gives a very nice all damage resistance, hit point, and shield capacity buff. All very good. And likewise, the aux power configuration offense is very good because it gives you also the all damage buff, but it's a Cat 2 all damage, and it gives you the accuracy rating, which actually is slightly useful again because of the the accuracy loss on the weapon abilities. So I think that makes this trait still just even better than it always has been. And since I'm running a Drake build and not aux to bat, my aux power will be high, so I will get pretty good benefit from these. And that synergizes well with the console, that it gives you additional aux power. It just works well with the build. As far as personal traits, I'm just going to go through these quickly. So Fleet Coordinator, still very good. Ablative Shell, I put that in there for a little more survivability, just to help out because, just the way things are now. It's harder to survive and you do a lot less damage with all these changes. So Romulan Operative, because I'm a Romulan, of course, very good. Inspirational Leader, this is much more affordable now. This is one of those lockbox traits that you can get on the exchange for a decent price nowadays. I am getting cannon training, which is just, an overall one of the standard traits you can get that improves cannon. I still have Particle Manipulator in here because I am using a gravity well. I might swap this out for something else. I've been tempted to try the Advanced Rapid Support, but there are some other things you could swap this out for, definitely. This is kind of a flex slot. Point Blank Shot. Now, I do believe this was in fact fixed now, where it does work with Beam Fire at Will. I don't even know if it worked with Scatter Volley before, but this trait is now fixed, so it should actually be pretty decent now. So worth slotting. Self-modulating fire is still good. It gives you that armor pen, or shield pen when you need it, or once every 45 seconds, not on demand. Now I am running Anchored. I do like Anchored because it gives you that pretty significant damage, +5 all damage, Cat 2 bonus when you're standing still, but it also gives you that -5 damage resistance rating, which hurts. So that stacks up to 4 times. That's kind of why I run this aux power config defense with this build to kind of offset Anchored. But so you kind of use this where kind of the idea is you'll fly in, you will use your gravity, come to a stop, use your gravity well in a good position to suck in all the enemies, use your cannon scatter volley and blow them all away while you have them all in your frontal arc. Because it's kind of hard if you're flying around at max velocity to keep everything in your frontal arc. So you do get a pretty decent use out of anchored. But again, this is kind of another flex slot. You could put Coalition Starship Tactics in there. That's a good one. What else could you put in there? I mean, there's lots of good traits. Actually, it's something that people have mentioned, now with all the buffs to hangar pets, you could put Wing Commander in here. That's another lockbox trait. I believe it is still reasonably affordable. I'm kind of curious if it's gone up now with Season 13, the price, but that's another trait you could consider. Wing Commander is a good one. All right, so that pretty much covers the traits. All right, so finally we get over here to bridge officers. So, like I said, now with the loss of attrition warfare, a lot of people are going back to previous builds. So that means you're going back to Drake builds, which is my personal favorite, which is a good way to at least make sure you maintain 100% uptime on your emergency power abilities. People are also going to Aux to Bat, which is coming back just because it provides, that cooldown reduction to all abilities. And there's kind of a little bit of a trade-off, if you want to go with a Drake build or a Aux to Bat build. I prefer Drake, particularly for this ship, and I'll try to explain why, but because there are kind of trade-offs there. And just using like reciprocity and all hands on deck and there's a lot of other recharge reducing traits out there that have been recently added for like temporal abilities and whatnot. So those are all good options for builds. Now, since I'm using a Drake build, the way Drake builds work is that you are going to be using duty officers. Let me bring up duty officers here. You're going to be using damage control engineers. All right, so that's the difference. A Drake build, you're going to be using 2 emergency power abilities and 3 damage control engineers. All right, and what that's going to do is these damage control engineers, they have a chance whenever you use the emergency power ability, it will reduce the cooldown on emergency power abilities. So if you're running 2 of them and you alternate between them, as long as these keep proccing, you will have pretty much 100% uptime on these abilities. There's only a small chance, like if for some reason all 3 don't proc twice in a row, which is a pretty low chance, you may have some downtime. So it's not 100%, but I've not had any problems keeping these pretty much 100% of the time, as long as you're running 3. I'd recommend at least blue quality 3 of these. If you have purple quality, that's probably better, but it's even almost overkill. If you look at these, it's a 30% chance, and you get 3 rolls of 30% chance each time one of these triggers, which is twice per cycle or twice per the duration, right? So they have a shared cooldown of 15 seconds and they last for 30. All right, so there we go. So that is the basics of the Drake build. You run the 2 emergency power abilities and 3 damage control engineers. Now, the strength of the Drake build is that you can get that 100% uptime, and you don't need to run 2 copies of it, right? And you don't need to run Aux to Bat. So kind of the idea here is that you would use a Drake build in particular on if you are short on engineering slots but have lots of tactical slots. Drake builds are kind of the way to go. And vice versa, if you have lots of engineering slots, so you can slot in those 2 Aux to Bats, then you would go with probably an Aux to Bat build, because if you have lots of engineering slots and not much tactical slots, you're not going to be able to run duplicates in your tactical slots, right? And for the Aux to Bat build, you're going to need to have 2 additional, engineering slots for the 2 Aux to Bats, and you're going to need to run here technicians instead of damage control engineers. All right. So those technicians will give cooldown to all abilities, which is nice. That's the nice thing about Aux to Bat, because it gives you the cooldown to everything, but it also kills your Aux power. That's the downside. So if you're going to run Aux to Bat, also I wouldn't be running those new Kara reputation traits, like the offensive and defensive configuration, because your Aux power will probably be in the crapper a lot of the time. So that's the way to do it. So that's kind of my recommendation. So if you're running a cruiser, heavy, and engineering, maybe go with an aux to bat, and then you only need to run one copy of each of the tactical abilities. Now in a Drake build, you are going to run dual copies on each of these abilities to some extent, right? You can get away with some things if you have some expensive Doffs, and if you're running reciprocity, you could probably get away with a little bit more as well. But this is how I would like to switch things up here, right? So I'm going with the Drake build because I have lots, like I said, I have few engineering but lots of tactical slots. So for a Drake build, so first thing I'm getting rid of my feedback pulse, right? That's gone. It's been nerfed into the ground. I'm not even going to be using the feedback pulse trait anymore. Instead, I'm going to go with a gravity well. With cannon scatter volley, since I'm now switching from beams to cannons, I want a gravity well to suck everything in and make everything hit. Where's my grav well? There it is. We're just going to do a grav well 1 here. Now I am going to keep in here override subsystem safeties. That is still a good ability. It was in doubt there for a little while because there was a little bit of a worry with the initial Tribble patch notes. They had said that when override subsystem safeties ends, you have that offline system for 5 seconds. They were making it so that would not be cleansed. That was terrible change. There was a lot of outcry about that, and thankfully Cryptic did change it now, so you are still able to cleanse that offline. You can do that with an engineering team, or also the Iconian hot restarts will do it. But again, those have a 60-second cooldown now, so you can't quite do it 100% of the time like you could before, but it's still pretty decent. So I still run 2 of them. So I'll be running 2 of these. I'll be running a gravity well to suck everything in to kill it with cannon scatter volley. Now what to do with the tactical. So as a Drake build, you need to run 2 copies of your weapon ability. So in my case, cannon scatter volley. And you also need to run 2 copies of your attack pattern. Now, if you are rich and you can afford a lot of Zamox, and with the tactical readiness, you could probably get to the point where you could just run 1 of your attack pattern, and that would free up a slot. Also, if you're running reciprocity, you might also be able to get away with that as well. But yes, right now I'm going with invincibility instead of reciprocity. I may rethink that. But let's just go with the classic Drake build here. So I'm going to run cannon scatter volley 3 and 2. So we got 2 copies of that. That will keep that at 100% uptime. I'm going to run... now here I'm going to run beta as my attack pattern. And over here with these slots, I'm going to run beta. So now I've got 2 betas, 2 attack patterns. So I'll have the highest possible uptime on beta and on cannon scatter volley. Cannon scatter volley will be at 100% uptime because I do have the withering barrage trait. Now what to do with these last 2 slots here? Well, I did have chemosite laced weaponry in here, and it's still a decent ability, but I don't know I'll be able to fit it anymore because I need to be able to fit a torp spread in here, and I also need a tac team. So tac team is just absolutely critical. So I'll definitely put a tactical team here, and yeah, or I could just I could just do this way, do a torp spread here, and yeah. So there we go. We got torp spread, tactical team. It will not get 100% uptime on the torp spread. That's unfortunate. I just don't have the slots for it. So again, it might be a case to run. I do have the tactical readiness, right, and I do have I do have that going for me, so that will help in that regard, help it a little bit, but it still will not be 100% uptime. So it would be more like every other torpedo will probably get it because yeah, the crystalline energy torpedo has, I believe, 12-second firing rate, so it's kind of a long firing rate anyway. So they'll be every 12 seconds, then at 24 seconds you get another shot. That one won't get the torp spread, and then the one after that will. So that's how that will be working. But and now tactical team also won't have 100% uptime, but I am going to be running con officers here to reduce the cooldown on tactical team, to try to keep it up as much as possible. So that reduces the recharge time by 8 seconds, and then by so that will be good. The blue one does it for, I think, 6. Yeah. And I am going to continue to run Agent Nerul because I'm going to be using attack pattern betas. Agent Nerul is still great for the healing you get from the attack pattern while attack pattern beta is running, so I'll be having pretty good uptime on attack pattern beta with this build. What else should I be running here? So like I said, this is a Drake build, so you'll be running 2 emergency power abilities, and these will have 100% uptime because of the damage control engineers and the duty officer. Let me just keep duty officers open here, yeah. So that will have 100% uptime because of the 3 damage control engineers. Now, I do have 1 extra slot here. What should I run? Oxtasif is still great, but there are options here, and since I'm going to be running 2 copies of Override Subsystem Safeties, I'm going to swap this out to an engineering team so I can cleanse the system outage if I really, really need to. If the hot restart doesn't pick it up, I do have this. But you could also run like Reverse Yield Polarity there as well. This was nerfed a bit. There are some other options like skills that I never ran before, like Aceton Beam actually got some very nice buffs. Might be worth it. And if you could run. Yeah, what else could you run here? Well, you could think about some other options there. I'm thinking of, I'm forgetting the name of the trait, or sorry, the name of the skill. And I can't remember the name of the skill. Directed Energy Modulation, thank you. I knew it was DEM. But you could run that, like a lower version of it. Particularly if you're running like the Francis Doff, might be, if you can afford that as well, it might be worth running a directed energy modulation there. And then in the last slot here, I just have an ensign science, and I thought I would throw in a hazard emitters there, or maybe a science team might be another way to go. Hazard emitters is great now though for the continuously removing the hazard debuffs. That's actually a buff that hazard emitters got, so that's really, really good for the whole duration there. It'll keep cleansing those debuffs. So really, really good. So this is the build I'm going with. It is a Drake build, and you see here my Doffs. And I think that pretty much covers the build, guys. But like I said, there's other options. You could do an Ox to Bat, particularly if you have a surplus of engineering. You could do an Ox to Bat and then only run 1 copy of your tactical abilities. You could also just try to go with a like if you had a lot of Zamox and running Reciprocity, you might be able to get away with just running 1 copy even with a Drake build. That could be a way to go. Right, so that is the build, guys. That's all my recommendations for updating your build to Season 13 readiness. I have had pretty decent luck with this. I've run it through an ISA, I've run it through some patrols. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and run through a patrol right now just to cap off this video. Let's head over to Argala and check it out. Let's go ahead and head up to space, and we'll do just a quick Argala run. You'll see how this performs, and we'll leave it off there. So hopefully this was helpful. I know that was long, going through a lot of detail there, but let's face it, guys, there were a lot of changes in this Season 13 patch. I mean, there was just so many balance changes. Affected a lot of builds, and hopefully that that was a little more helpful way to go through it, to actually see a little more practical application of what some of the options are, what is still good, what needs to be changed, rather than just going through a laundry list of patch notes. Because I'm telling you guys, I've read through those patch notes like a dozen times now. I even read through, there's a nice Reddit thread that summarizes them, and I was still confused even after reading through them so many times. You just got to get into the game and kind of mess around and see what works. So that said, my suggestions are definitely not perfect, guys. I'm open to any feedback in the comments below. This is still all fresh here. We're all trying to explore the new options and with all these changes. So it's there's still a lot of unknowns. Things have not settled down. The meta is not really fixed at this point. So I'm definitely not saying this is the end-all be-all guide here, but just some suggestions to help people get started out with season 13 and maybe get a little bit of help, and then from there you can continue to refine your builds. Don't just take this as gospel. All right. So let me just go through and make sure my bars are set up here. Ooh, yeah, switch that. Let's get that out. Yeah, we can leave those there for now. Let's see, anything else I wanted to put in here? I got my console, I got my grab well. I think I've got everything all set. Actually, while I'm here, I'm going to show you something, how the Drake build works, okay? So you can actually see here on my bar, this is my spacebar mashing bar, and this is part of how the Drake build works and why. Let me just do something real quick here. Let me get rid of. Let me do this real quick here. All right. So this is my spam spacebar. I actually don't spam spacebar. I have a Razer Naga mouse, and I have a macro set that will spam it for me. And it's actually not spacebar. I bound it to a different key. But here's how I run it. And the way the Drake build works, you're going to have 100% uptime on your 2 emergency power abilities. And since I'm running 2 copies of everything, those should have pretty near 100% uptime as much as possible. My Torp ability being the kind of the exception there, and tactical team will not be 100%, but it will be as close as I can with only one copy because I am running the con officers. So let me just go ahead and hit my button here. So if this is if you're spamming, so there you go, everything is activated, right? And you can see that there was the shared cooldown, so my emergency power to weapons went off. That pumps my emergency power, or my weapons power, way up. Then the emergency to shields goes off. That pumps your shield, actually increases your shield power and pumps that up a bit. And you can see weapons power's got 1 second left, and right as it wears off, it goes back up again. And likewise, you could see here, emergency power to shields. Actually, it looks like it didn't proc that time because it is going to drop off. Yep, looks like I got unlucky that time, but it should come back. Let's see when it comes back here. You should see the recharge time on that one reduce. Yep, there you go. So yep, so that cycle did not go perfectly as far as the Drake build goes, which is kind of odd. Actually, I've been testing this earlier, and it was working quite well. So you see here we got 15, 14, and it's at 14 here. So right when emergency power to shields is going to drop off, it should come right back up. Two, one. It was off for just like a second there. And the emergency power to weapons. Yeah, it looks like I'm missing some procs here. So that's a little bit unfortunate, but yeah, that's making me think I might want to invest in... Man, I might want to invest in maybe like 1 or 2 points into engineering readiness in my skill tree. Might be worth it. I could maybe take a point out of one of these and put it over here into engineering readiness. Maybe take a point out of exotic particle and put it over here into engineering readiness. I'm not sure, but I am getting that little bit of a downtime, so the Drake build is not working as great as I had hoped. It's working good this time. So yeah, the weapons will be coming off in 4 seconds. It should come right back up to... So hard with the icons moving around to track everything. But yep, came right back online. And this has 12 seconds left, and this is just at 12 seconds. So yeah, so now it's working good. But you can, you can miss a cycle there, and you will have a little bit of downtime on your abilities. So, yeah, looking at this, I might want to invest in maybe 1 point of engineering readiness. I'll look into that. That would keep it a lot more guaranteed to get that 100% uptime with a Drake build. Okay, so that's that. But you can see that the 2 copies are working well. Cannon Scatter Volley is definitely getting 100% uptime thanks to Withering Barrage. You've got 7 seconds left here, and you can see this is going to be coming off in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It'll go right back up. So again, just a very short outage there of Scatter Volley. And attack pattern betas do have a little bit of downtime just because the duration is only 10 seconds and the shared cooldown is 15. So when this one activates, this will go back up to 15. So you're always going to have that little bit of downtime in attack pattern beta. You will have some downtime in the override subsystem safeties as well. Reciprocity would help with that. But you've got to run 2 copies of this because the cooldown for this one does not start until the duration ends. So you need to have, this copy needs to be recharging during the duration of the other copy. You'll see when this one comes off, when the buff wears off for this one, it goes back to the 1 minute. And you can see by hot restart, pick that up real quick. So yeah, if you want to have decent uptime on override subsystem safeties, I still would recommend running 2 there as well. Reciprocity would help with that though. So based on this, I'm thinking about maybe investing 1 point into engineering readiness in this build, and maybe running reciprocity might be the way to go. But that's how it works, guys. That's the basics of the Drake build. Go ahead and put this one back down here. Of course, when you activate your tactical initiative, you're going to have really good uptime on all of your tactical ability, or all of your abilities actually. Or no, it's only your tactical, that's right, yep. Alright, so that is it as far as the Drake build. Just want to give you a little demo of how the cooldown reduction works there and keeping your emergency power abilities up all the time. Which is of course important because, a lot of traits trigger off that. This emergency power weapon cycle triggers off that. You want to keep your emergency power up as much as possible, just because it also puts power into your subsystems here, so it's good. You want to keep those at 100% uptime. Alright, let's head over to the Delta Quadrant and run a Argala. So there it is, guys. I'm kind of curious to see what, now that everyone's had a day or two to play with Season 13, what do you guys think with all these balance changes? I mean, even with, fixing up my build like this, trying to update everything, I still feel that it is definitely very much underpowered compared to what it used to be. No question about it. It is a pretty heavy hit across the board. Whether that's a good thing or bad thing, I mean, I mentioned it before in the previous video, in my initial reaction video, where I always prefer the idea of, I don't think nerfing all the players down is a good way to do it. I think that if you're going to have power creep, that new content should be added to the game at a higher difficulty. Give someone who had invested in all this power creep, give them a challenge by making the content harder. Don't give them a challenge by saying, okay, everything you've invested into is now going to be 50% of what as strong as it used to be, and then now all the content you used to breeze through is now going to be hard again. So as a philosophical point, I don't really like the changes, but I mean, I see what they were going for. They wanted to make the content hard again. It's just not the way I would have gone about it. But, that's not really the point of this video. This video is all about just, what you should do to adjust to these changes. Alright, I believe I have it on advanced. I'll go ahead and leave it there for now. Let's go ahead and do a run. But I'm curious what you guys think. I mean, I've definitely noticed the hit in damage and survivability. Just the hit to not having your abilities up all the time, which was always one of the great things with the old builds. The old attrition warfare, attrition warfare actually gave you a lot of flexibility because you could very easily, you only need 1 copy of all your bridge officer abilities. You could swap out duty officers because, Drake build and Mox to Bat build both require They both require a pretty, significant investment of Doffs. You've got to put 3 Doffs, either damage control engineers or technicians, in both of those builds, so you kind of lose a little bit of flexibility on the Doff side. Okay, let's give this build a good try here. So when this group comes, I'm going to cloak up. Let's head over here. Let's go ahead and buff up. This is how I like to use this build, right? So I'm going to decloak, gravity well, and then boom, nuke him. Let's go ahead and put attack pattern alpha on here. That one got away, so it didn't get him into my area of effect. I was able to get both of these carriers into my arc. Yeah, I mean, I could definitely tell my damage is not what it once was. But pretty good cooldown on gravity well with this build. All hands on deck is still doing work to keep that cooldown quite low. It also keeps the cooldown nice and low on your hazard emitters as well. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell that this is definitely a lot slower. Like, a lot of these spawns would have been vaped a lot quicker with the old build. It's definitely a noticeable change, no doubt about it. I do really like the new heavy weapons, though. A very cool graphical effect. Let's get cannon scatter volley going again here. I do like cannons. Cannons are a lot of fun. I was starting to use them more and more with my hybrid build anyway. But, okay, let's do one big nuke here on this spawn. So I'm going to go ahead and cloak up. Okay, in this case, I'm going to activate all of even my big cooldowns here. And let's... Why is my... Oh, he's behind that stupid asteroid. God dang it. That always happens. I was wondering why I lost that. Well, that's great. So all my cooldowns are probably overblown here. Let's go and grab one. So that wasn't as impressive as I thought, because he went out of line of sight and now my cooldowns were off, so that wasn't good. And that's the thing, I mean, your cooldowns are all a lot shorter now, so you got to be a lot more judicious when you use your heavy cooldowns, like your consoles and your attack pattern alpha now and everything. So, but again, it is still an effective build. I mean, I'm still able to do the content fine on advanced. I could probably also do it still on elite, although it would take a bit longer. So, yep, so there it is, guys. Let's go ahead and get out of here. That is the build, and those are the changes in Season 13. So, hopefully that helps you get your build up to date. I'm still trying to refine it as well, so there's still a lot to learn here with all these changes. It's just... The changes are so extensive, affecting so many different systems and how things interact. It's really hard to know right off the bat what is going to be a good build. But at least, hopefully this will help people get started. And you can see it is still effective on advanced. I was able to run ISA perfectly fine. I have not actually been parsing my runs yet because I'm still trying to refine things, but I'll go ahead and start parsing them again and see how I do. It's definitely going to be under 100K, that's for sure. So it's definitely going to be, pretty big hit. I think my results will probably be along the lines of what most people are saying, where it's going to be, a good 30-40% overall nerf to damage. But anyway, that is it. Hopefully that was helpful, everyone. I still am looking forward to making the video on the featured episode. So now that I think I have a build at least into a decent enough point here, I am going to do the featured episode, and I will run it on Elite just to see how it goes. I have been running the featured episodes on Elite through my past few Let's Plays on the last few episodes, featured episodes, just because it has a little bit of a challenge and spice to it. And maybe a little bit different from what other people are doing. So gives people an idea of what things are on Elite. So that will be coming up, yeah. Then it's on to looking at some of the new cues that came out, yeah, that's going to take a little while. I need to run them a few more times and try to learn all the tricks, but they are definitely unique, and there are going to be some problems. I can already tell with pickup groups, but we'll get into that in another video. For now, thanks for watching, everyone. Hopefully this helps. I mean, the changes are so overwhelming. I still feel overwhelmed, but I just wanted to get this video out, at least, help everyone get a start with their build. So, all right, that's all. Thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.